Hello, I'm Robert, and Samantha and Cosma are hiding under the table right now. That's my wife and kid. So I just wanted to read some text on the project. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's really great to see everyone's projects, and unfortunately I have to leave on Saturday, so I won't see the whole lineup, but anyways. This project is called, and excuse me if I butcher the Italian, but it's called Piante Piani Prospetti, which is plants, plans, and elevations. The project takes as a starting point the etymological relationship between plan and plant, Piante e Piani. This simple play on words will begin a discourse between representation in the discipline of architecture and its historical relationship to nature, in which the creation of a plan literally means to plant in the ground. This relationship has new importance in today's climate crisis. The project is about returning to the beginning of architecture to find a way forward. So that sounds pretty heroic, and I'd like to speak a little more candidly and just about the project. In academia, there's a renewed interest in CLTs and cross-laminated timber and mass timber construction. And what that basically is giant pieces of plywood. So, like this material, they glue pieces of wood together, except like this scaled up by 20 or 40 or whatever. So this project is kind of a meditation on, I'm supposed to be setting this stuff up while I'm talking. The original condition of wood as a material, and there's companies in Washington State where there's a lot of forests. One specifically I'm thinking about called Curated, which grows the forest, like they grow the trees, they process the trees, they ship them, they build these CLT buildings. So it's kind of a literally like start to finish supply chain. At the same time, we are facing global deforestation. So it's ironic because wood construction is valorized or seen as this virtue. In Europe, I know there's recently this mandate about 50% buildings being wood or something like that. So I think we can all agree that there should be probably more trees in the world and not less. They produce oxygen, This project somewhat oscillates between cute and nightmare because the trees are all cut up and anyways. I'm not going to set that one up. All right, can I have the big forest house? Yeah. All right, Cosma is ready to start the performance. I guess I'm going to put these bases on later because I didn't have time. Okay. Does this thing have an off button?
Is Enrique Ventosa, Paula Corras, and Ana Olmedo, who are Bollería Industrial. And where are you from? They're from Spain. And they work between architecture, art, and design, and their research leads to exhaustive projects that are able to materialize complex ideas into functional prototypes and projects. Thank you.
Hi. We are Bollería Industrial. Paula and I'm Ana. The third member is not here today, but we will represent him well, I guess. I'm going to prepare the presentation. So today we are going to present broadcasts of contemporary interiors. Is a reflection on the multiplicity and temporary use of domestic spaces. This research is structured in 3 chapters, focused on different historical moments, context, location, in which the family house has been subdivided and transformed to allocate a completely different way of living that in all of the cases is framed by time. Each of the chapters represents also a different stage in the architectural way of working. So in that sense, the first project is a research, the second one is an not yet built project, and the third one is an already built one. We have used this strategy of the 3 chapters because the intention was like each of us has put like personal interest in one of them. So you are gonna see like they have totally different way of presenting, and like even though they are inside the same frame, thematic frame, all of them, each of them is focused on a different and a specific point of view. So I'm going to start with chapter 1 that is called A Room of One's Own Domesticity in Post-War London. This chapter is about the bedsit as an architectural typology that offers an alternative to the dominant ideals of heteronormative domesticity that were imposed in post-war London. So to give you a sort of short introduction, in 1944, Patrick Abercrombie designed a plan to reconstruct London after the war. It was based on a zoning principle. Oops, sorry. Okay, it was based on a zoning principle, and it relocated. Let me think, because this is a video and I don't know when it's not playing.
It's a beautiful one. We should see it. We should watch it.
Tía Paula, no me lo puedo pasar. Okay. Okay, I'm going to show it. Then. Okay, so now. So it was based on a zoning principle, and it relocated over 1 million Londoners from the crowd.
Well,
let me do it again, sorry. Let's try again. Okay, so the plan was based on a zoning principle. Okay, so it was meant to move 1 million Londoners from the overcrowded inner city to a series of new satellite towns built outside the Greenbelt. So the movement of middle-class young couple out of London to follow a normative form of domesticity left behind a series of communities that were segregated by the access of age, race, class. This socioeconomic condition led landlords to subdivide the otherwise redundant large Victorian houses into low-rent units or bedsites. This alternative form of domesticities in bedsit have been remarkably depicted in the film The L-Shaped Room, which is set in the post-war neighborhood of Notting Hill. This raw human story dealt with super controversial social issues such as sexual orientation, sex work, immigration, abortion, etc. So the film characters, all of the film characters threaten the notion of domesticity and family living in different ways. So for example, Jane is the unmarried pregnant woman who lives in the attic. Her neighbor, Johnny, the Afro-Caribbean gay immigrant. The heterosexual writer, Toby, living in the second floor. Marvis, the lonely elderly lesbian living in the first floor, Doris, the inquisitive landlady, and the sex workers, Sonia and Jane, who live and work in the basement. For Jane, the L-shaped room is the marginal room at the top of the property, which she rents as an expatriated pregnant woman and unmarried. So Jane is in a difficult position in which a lot of women found themselves in 1950s because it was like 10 years before abortion became illegal in the UK. So in the bedsit, she finds a place to pass. Is working? In the bedsit, she finds a place to pass her single pregnancy without being judged in a domestic environment in which no one of the other tenants would ask her questions. This general character of hiding one's feelings and keep them to themselves was physically materialized in bedsits. This marginal character of this architectural typology made it a sort of closet for those that were outside the norm. Johnny, the gay Jamaican character, is giving a really important view to the story because it's giving like a clear geographical location and cultural background to the story. The largest Jamaican immigration wave that took place in London was in 1944 due to the labor shortage after the war. These newcomers found affordable living expenses in Notting Hill, a neighbor known for its immigrant population, but also for its large concentration of sexual dissidents. Even though this character is never fully depicted in the film, the object displayed in his room constitute the terms of his sexuality. In this period of repressive rules against gay men, lesbianism was not a criminal event nor a subject of moral public. Such underestimation and lack of legal interest allowed Marvis and her girlfriend to live together without arousing suspicion. Lesbians were not considered then a consistent public figure at that time. So confined within the solitude of her bedsit after her girlfriend died, for Marvis, this interior appears to be her only space for self-expression. Sonia and Jane found in the basement an opportunity to manage their own bodies and labor, avoiding the violence and exploitative condition that often that sex workers often suffer in the streets. Sorry. All decorated with second-hand pre-war furniture, Sonia and Jane's bedsit is memorable for its dim lights and its many mirrors. While bed-sitting is a form of a permanent inhabitation for the majority of the characters, for Toby, his bedsit seems to be something temporary prior marriage. If Family Houses brought a highly gendered performance in which men were breadwinners and women were housekeepers, in this bedsit, Toby finds a type of domesticity that allows him to create an autonomous life for himself and also permits him to work as a writer. Even though there is like a sense of community between the inhabitants, there is also a sense of uncertainty because of the oversight of the landlady. Doris lives in the first floor where all the communication with the exterior are displayed. It's the place where the phone rings, the door is knocked, and the letters are delivered. And from there, she can survey and control every movement. So even she is quite inquisitive. We realize by the end of the film that this kind of domesticity wouldn't be able without her tolerance or maybe her indifference. These outsider identities found in bedsits and architectural typology that allow them to create a domestic environment from their own, showing that domesticity in bedsits was based in a live and let live toleration.
Okay, and here comes the second chapter. The second chapter is a future project on the same topic. The commission, which is still in development, still an ongoing project and research, was aimed to refurbish a protected 1890 old fisherman's house for vocational dwelling purposes. With this in mind, we began to redesign this residential space, looking for ways to enhance it with strategies prepared for helping the client to be a super host and attracting a specific public, the so-called traveler, not tourist. Since the creation of the Airbnb platform in 2008, peer-to-peer accommodations grew in less than 10 years, more than the whole Hilton brand in 100 years. So Airbnb has created a worldwide hotel formed by an enormous network of more than 4 million of rooms. Underused spaces and interiors like this are being recovered to generate new urban services, a phenomenon that has changed the conception of our urban fabric to become a flexible one. Only in Spain, there are more than 200,000 flats for rent just on Airbnb, although Italy is the country with the most desired interiors, according to the Airbnb Instagram users. But the most demanded spaces are always located in its historical centers of the main cities. Sometimes, just one housing block has more than the 20% of the accommodations available in the city. For instance, in Madrid, there are more than 300 interiors available, concentrated in just a few housing blocks in La Latina area. But location is not so important now. Quality and design are the new musts, quite far from renting out some mattress in the floor of one's apartment. These are the not so well-known Airbnb looks, curated with special services like a special trip designer and helpful superhosts, and the Airbnb Plus with high-end design standards. So we are not only talking about interiors, but also about experiences, slow life, sustainability, and the target is quite recognizable. The traveler, no tourist, is certainly more demanding. They are looking for some stereotype level of travel experience by getting local, but at the same time they want something less travel, exotic, and surprising. They suffer a little of FOMO, fear of missing out, not only digital, but also analogical, apparently living in a continuous vacation lifestyle full of experiences. This is also why Airbnb Experiences aggregator launched in 2016 after mixing too many experiences into temporary homes, such as different kinds of parties, raves, and so on. So this helps owners to manage the different possibilities for using their spaces. The curation criteria is not clear enough either. In 2008, Airbnb bought Luxury Retreats, a high-end rental company, and they make the cut for the Lux and Plus programs. Leaving aside all the legal and regulation matters, this seems to be the design requirements for 2020 to feature on the list of the most desired interiors for temporary use. Privacy and a fictional loneliness is demanded, which helps to continue this fictional feeling of being in your very own private and outstanding vacational house. In this matter, traditional hotels find themselves unable to keep up, and it's the new kind of grand tour. Design and styling with high-end quality design. Stories. Yes, the space must tell a story. For instance, this couple spending their vacation on an Airbnb in Palermo share on Instagram the feeling of being in a Godfather movie atmosphere. The importance of the kitchen and having distinctive amenities, for example, family or kid-friendly tag work as well as one of them, one amenity. Having a trip designer who works like a travel agent. Sometimes is a so-called superhost, but not always. It's the same person. And having also the possibility of staff services at users' disposal. By collecting images of Instagram, real users, news, aspirational references, and so on, we will add more unofficial design strategies and needs to the list, such as shifting uses, accessibility, views, panorama, light, water surfaces, any kind, open plan features, some local design flavor, and so on. The interiors must achieve 300 points in these categories to become Lux and 100 points to become Plus, given by other superhosts invited to the platform to review them. They also make a list of what is missing and can be fixed in the property, and the host has the opportunity to improve it, so other superhosts become also designers of the final setup of the house. Definitely, these houses are not hotels, but not proper houses either. The result of this will be some sort of edited spaces that could be added to the network of Airbnb-ready interiors that have recently emerged from architects and designers' offices. And with this, here comes the chapter 3. The chapter 3 is called 5 Individualities When a Fake Uniqueness is the Only Way. And here we wanted to talk about materiality in temporary interiors in an already built project. The location of the project is in Malasaña area in the center of Madrid. With the rapid gentrification that the city center of Madrid is experimenting, flats are becoming completely impersonal and boring. And this is the beginning state. The commission we received was to make a singular student housing apartment, and everything needed to be held in 110 square meters, divided in 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a communal kitchen and living room. This student housing flat want the students to feel excited and different from their flatmates. This is why 5 individualities are projected in one single housing unit, hoping to create an heterogeneous and unique environment. The materials, colors, the furniture, everything is different in each room. The floors, walls, and materials are thought individually, creating different atmospheres depending on color and texture, always taking into consideration that is also needed to be practical. And here come some pictures of the project. This is the communal living room. In this room, hydraulic checkerboard floors and wooden boiseries give a contemporary, sophisticated taste. This one, Wood is the protagonist, is the darkest room in the apartment, facing a small courtyard, so it needed to be warm up. The terrazzo from the floor grows along the wall, creating a bed headboard. It has a warm color in contrast to the coldness of the material, which, due to the thickness of the tiles, hold one self and a side self. Also in this room, and in this one, wood is a protagonist. And this is the first bathroom, a color inspiration in the well-known Jardin Majorel. The second bathroom, with skin tones color inspiration. The canopied bed works as well in one shelf, light, and besides table, all in one in this room. And this is the smallest room. One wall of the room is a full mirror that reflects the color, creating a visual effect that makes the room feel bigger, like doubling its size. In this project, we defend crafts in response to personalization. So we propose these interiors that highlight the local thoughts. That's why we made also this exhibition called Bruto that captures the reformation of the house by different agents. For instance, photographer Eduardo Lopez made visible what is buried behind all the layers of what we really see at the end by making visible the ages of the project, or artists Javi Navarro and Federico Lepre generated a galaxy of materials found in a construction apartment. The representation of the spaces is a diagrammatic drawing where the volume of the materials increase according to the surfaces where they are applied or to the prices that they cost, avoiding their real dimensions and purposes.
So with this presentation, our aim was to show that the production of domestic interiors is done like through lifestyle, cultural material, and also by the subjectivization and singularization of the residents living in those spaces. We also wanted to highlight that time is a frame that is very important in the three chapters that we have presented, but also the flexibility of the structure of the house that made possible to be in constantly flux, to be adapted and allocate completely different inhabitants in them. So thank you.
All right, and our next presenter is Pedro Pitarch. Pedro was the Steedman Fellow and also a teaching fellow in architectural design at the Bartlett, and he wanders in a somewhat tangential position to architectural practice, focusing on the interrelations between contemporary cultural production and the construction of societies.
I need to change. I need to change to the other computer. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. When the project I'm about to present is called Transcapes, Unveiling the Masquerade of Urban Domesticity, and being it a research project, it was kind of difficult for me to decide which material to bring for the presentation. So I deliberately tried to avoid making that decision, and I just brought the whole archive of materials, references, and precedents that I used in order to articulate the whole research. Okay, so oh, I don't know which one to use, maybe this one. So the project, should I? Oh, yeah, cool. The project kind of tries to provide answer to one very basic question. That is how to trace the genealogy of public realm construction in the contemporary city, and actually how to solve that continuous tension between public and private realm that have defined the shape of the city during centuries. For centuries, the design of the city was actually ruled by one condition, the right of property, which differentiated two basic differentiated realms. One was the domestic realm and the urban realm. However, in the contemporary city, things have changed, and there has been a migration from the right of property to the right of accessibility and use. And therefore, urban and domestic realm have no clear longer boundaries, and their limits are blurred, defining urban domesticity. That has unfolded a series of unexpected typologies that are defining the shape of the contemporary metropolitanism of our cities. These typologies do not respond to spatial matters anymore, but to relational matters. I have identified 4 conditions that define these typologies of urban domesticity, and I'm going to introduce them through 4 chapters or 4 parts of the research project. And actually, as an outcome for each of them, I have defined, or I have done 4 drawings that each of them is actually kind of a speculative project that comes out as an outcome of each part of the research. So therefore, 4 typologies and 4 landscapes. They correspond to metropolitan situations that actually generate city, and they construct society, but they haven't been yet included in the kind of professional practice of architecture and urbanism, nor so much in the architectural academic discourse. So the first typology is called This Greenfield is My Home, and for that one I'm going to take advantage of, to explain it, of one drawing that I have down here. That is this one, that is what I called Nuova Topografia di Glastonbury, and it's the actual plan of Glastonbury Festival in the UK. This typology claims for the acknowledgement of the event as architecture. These so-called altermodern events, they are ephemeral typologies of contemporary urbanism. They actually kind of produce a type of pop-up of metropolitanism that appear and disappear. They have festivals such as kind of Glastonbury, Coachella, Lollapalooza, or gay parades, or comic cons, or LAN parties. They have achieved with great success of gathering what traditional cities with consolidated urban fabric and singular architecture from well-known star architects are far from offering. They are redefining a metropolitan paradigm where performance is substituting construction. The roots of this typology and the genealogies of this typology can be traced back to the end of the 19th century, when the World Columbian Exhibition took place in Chicago in 1893. Actually, the hardly recognized by architectural history, this exhibition had an element or an architectural artifact that was very important for this typology of urbanism, and it was not located inside the fields of the exposition, but actually in a side event of the exposition that was the Midway Plaisance. For such an exhibition, Daniel Burnham, which was the architect that was kind of the coordinator of the whole exhibition, decided to make an architectural contest in order to outshine the Eiffel Tower that was constructed in the previous exhibition in Paris. So out of that contest, and after receiving several unsatisfactory entries, a young George Washington Gale Ferris arrived with a proposal of a giant spinning wheel of almost 90 meters tall. While the Eiffel Tower was actually a static, optimized structural element which responds to the actual distribution diagram of its forces, the Ferris wheel instead acted as a social condenser, as an architectural dynamic device that was a catalyzer of context for emancipation. While the Eiffel Tower became an icon and was kind of image-based and actually actually it became sort of a souvenir that we can now carry in our pockets. The Ferris wheel instead became an experience and became a spectacle. Ironically, after many years, the whole set of plans of construction documents from the Eiffel Tower have survived until our days, but no construction document of the original Ferris wheel have survived, but only its patent, which, more ironically, was not registered by George Ferris, but somebody else. More than half of a century afterwards, the pop festivals from the 60s are carry on the legacy of this typology of catalyzer of context, such as the Ferris wheel. It won't be until the 90s when they will consolidate with examples such as Glastonbury. For the purpose of explaining this type of urbanism, I have tried to draw the plan of Glastonbury in the same way, or using the same technique that Noli used for drawing the Nuova Tipografia di Roma, and I produced this drawing that is called Nuova Tipografia di Glastonbury. And it reveals a series of features or characteristics from the event or the altermodern event. The altermodern event offers a new paradigm of urbanism, one where playlists, timelines, and schedules are as important, and performances are as important as structure, partitions, materials, voids, and all these kind of conventional elements from conventional architecture. Also, the altermodern event is ultimately an architectural frame because the boundaries of events such as Glastonbury, they materialize the transition from the daily self of the user to the eventual self. They become transformational playgrounds for adults where they also become testing grounds for different type of habits and social behaviors that are not so normative or common outside of the boundaries of the event, but within the event, they can be tested. And for such a reason, there is a suspension of the law of urbanism within the event, which means that the event is not urban per se, but it's what I've called transurban. The second typology that I'm going to explain is called This Train is My Home, and it refers to how transport infrastructure can become a distributor of domesticities among the cities. In such a way, in many Asian cities, such as Tokyo and many other Asian megacities, commuting practices have defined the home as an exploded association of dispersed elements all over the city, which, connected through a complex network of transport, dematerialize this new type of domesticity. In stations such as Shibuya, which is the one that I am showing in this drawing that I will later on show more in depth, commuting becomes a type of urbanism, and home becomes a whole territory. In that way, the railway plan of Tokyo does not merely represent a transport infrastructure, but represents the transit of Tokyotan domesticities along different scenarios or along different spheres of the city. In both Tokyo and Japan, railway has become a urban planner, and railway stations are not just transport hubs, but domestic hub. And that type of shift has defined a dispersed model of the home. Lines such as Yamanote have become real urbanizers of Tokyo, and the loop of the Yamanote line actually explain how urbanism and how urban domesticity and how the Japanese domesticity has been defined. The designs or the architectures of the Yamanote line train, they represent the coordination of localities along Tokyo. And the architectures of the Shinkansen train, the so-called bullet train, represents the mediation of urbanities along Japan. Shibuya, which is the station that I have analyzed through this research, is the second major station of the Yamanote line, but it's actually the most or the biggest in terms of social congestion of domesticities. In order to understand how Shibuya works in terms of domesticity, I have done a drawing that is actually, or is inspired in the kind of traditional and old Japanese scrolls, and which I manage. Maybe I can take it out from the box. Okay, yeah. So this drawing that I have done is done in the same way as this kind of old Japanese scroll drawings, and it represents all the domesticities that are coordinated through the station of Shibuya, and how the Japanese and the Tokyotan domesticity becomes actually a coordinator of many dispersed practices and activities that in other kind of Western countries, they would be concealed inside the boundaries of the conventional home, but in Japan and in Shibuya, and thanks to the Yamanote line, they are kind of extruded and dispersed out of the boundaries of the home and into the urban realm. Through this drawing, I have explored that Shibuya is actually a home. Manga kisas become bedrooms for many salarymen that commute in Shibuya every day. The snack bars of Nonbei Yokocho, they become sitting rooms for middle-aged men. Karaoke bars of Udawakacho, they perform as real living rooms for group of all ages. And along, etc., of other type of domesticities, where even the vending machine or the lockers of the new south exit of Shibuya, they become wardrobes or fridges or other elements that would be domestic elements in the more conventional domesticity of other Western countries. The third typology is called This Plaza is My TV, and it refers to how tourism practices construct leisure fiction. The rising speed of the economies of developing countries and also some Asian cities, they have overpopulated their capitals with extreme urbanism, where a spectacle is overtaking the position of urbanism. It has generated a series of architecture that construct fake realities. Megacities, traditional villages, and natural parks, or even ancient ruins, they have become scenographies. And they are proposing a new type of urbanism where the tension between the fake and the real are negotiated every day. In such a city, form follows experience and not function. Again, the roots and the genealogies of this typology can be traced back actually again to the World Columbian Exhibition, which became a strong influence for a young Walt Elias Disney for the inspiration of Disneyland. The fact was that Walt's father was a constructor at the time of the World Columbian Exhibition, and while he was a kid, the tales and stories about that fair that congregated and gathered within the boundaries of that exhibition in Chicago's Jackson Park, it gathered a series of pieces of the whole world, and it was constructing an artificial context there for leisure. Such an experience, such as for example, the attraction in the World Columbian Exhibition of the Cliffs Dweller, it was an inspiration for the later Matterhorn in Disneyland in Anaheim in Los Angeles. Although ignored for more than 50 years, Disney's biggest achievement as an architect was actually to provide the tools for the generation of models without origin or reality. With the turn of the millennial, this type of urbanism has been imported, or has been actually exported to other cities, and it has become extremely interesting on how it has behaved as a tool for generation or for generating fake environments. This model that I'm showing here is the model of a city in the outskirts of Shanghai that is called Thames Town. In Thames Town, different fake environments from all over England are imported there, and it becomes urbanism here is experienced not just as a traditional or conventional public space, but actually it is experienced as a background for media empowering, and for example for taking pictures for weddings. It had become a funny place. But this type of urbanism is also influencing traditional neighborhoods of Beijing and Shanghai, and the Lilongs and Hutongs. They are experiencing a progressive fakeness that throughout this type of Disneyland urbanism, they are completely mediating between the fake and the real. So after many years, and when asked in an interview Walt Disney what he had learned from Disneyland, he said that the one thing that he learned from Disneyland was actually to control the environment. So such an attitude is used in the following project that I'm going to present, which is called the City of the Captive Event. The City of the Captive Event is a city in which festivals and events of the most diverse nature are produced simultaneously next to each other. A work festival, a myth festival, an affection festival, a political festival, or an infrastructural festival. The City of the Captive Event is devoted to the constant construction of enclosed context. And placed in the most artificial territory of the world, the Netherlands, the city represents the Dutch obsession for the control of the environment. The necessity for detachment from any existing reality conduces to a location that is the ultimate medium for abstraction, the water. Each artificial context is actually developed within an architectural frame that is equipped with a pontoon-like structure and floats over a lake that I'm not even able to pronounce because it's Dutch. The City of the Captive Event materializes the contemporary interchangeability between the artificial and the natural, as both as understood here as cultural constructions. The fourth typology that I'm going to explain, and the latest one, is named This Shop is My Living Room. And it explains how new medias have generated a whole territory for domestic socialization out of the boundaries of the home, and have transformed commercial facilities into public spaces for shared leisure. Such escape of the living room out of the home was already formalized during the early years of the Soviet Union after the Bolshevik Revolution, and through the typology or the proposals for workers' club that were gathering activities or practices that were conceived as domestic and were traditionally concealed within the living room and were now injected into the urban realm. But although Melnikov explored this typology and really kind of was crucial for the evolution of it, it was, for me, it's not so much as relevant as Ivan Leonidov, especially with two projects. One is the Club for a New Social Type, and the other one is the Palace of Culture of the Proletarsky District of Moscow. They are important for me because apart from being extremely cool and inspiring drawings, he proposed not just spaces, but an overall media network that was based in the clubs and that would produce a new kind of individuals that would be independent but simultaneously connected through media networks. So throughout this series of networks of clubs and with different type of medias, these users or these citizens would have the tools for socialize and emancipate through socialization. And after a limbo of more than 50 years, because those projects were not realized, two factors would behave or would define the rise of a new architectural typology that carry on the legacy of Leonidov's two projects. On the one hand, one of the factors or the reasons was the fragmentation and the dispersion of life and domesticity in Asian countries. And on the other hand was the influence of a technological development applied to leisure industry in societies such as Korea, which both led to spaces or types of architecture as these ones, the ones of the PC banks in Korea. Although playing video games is or has been conceived in Western countries as a lonely activity, in Korea is something much more different, and it's actually a very socializing activity. In these places, in PC banks, actually there is a constant mixture of online and offline experiences that enable to create unique social practices and cultural structures where domesticity and urbanity are perfectly blurred. However, the project, or for me actually the architectural projects that represent and actually catalyzed that shift and that migration of the domestic urban realm of the living room out of the shelters of the home is this device. Is the Nintendo Game Boy that was designed in the year '89 and that triggered a series of experiences through media that were taking or breaking the boundaries of that of those spaces of the PC banks that were still restricted to an architectural shelter out of the boundaries of the PC bank and actually into the stadium, leading to what has been called e-sports, and that are now these type of practices are as relevant as filling the whole Bird's Nest Stadium of Herzog and de Meuron with the finals of the League of Legends. Through this type of practices and through these experiences, online experiences are as important as offline experiences, where one of the main characters of one of the dragons of the League of Legends is actually injected or inserted through augmented reality into the boundaries of the stadium. And as an outcome of this typology, I am presenting a project that is called Social Type for a New Club, making a small kind of words game out of Leonidov's proposal, and which I am presented here through a drawing, and I'm actually going to take advantage of taking out the other drawing that I didn't took before. So I will explain it coming back there. For this project, the Social Type for a New Club, I am here proposing or testing a big sort of PC bank or gamer club that would substitute the worker club typology of the early Soviet Union inside of the boundaries of New York City Central Park. Through this proposal or through this project, some programs of the social club are injected into the brownstone buildings that are next to Central Park. Or, for example, a big floating grid is hosting up to 1,000 people that could stay in social housing inside of Central Park, and a series of elements and artifacts that would trigger and catalyze this context for emancipation through leisure. Through all of these proposals, or through the analysis of these four typologies, I have tried to prove that a shop or even a whole park can become a living room when a gamer's raid is played between friends within a PC bank, or a train is turned into a bedroom when citizens' daily commuting practices struck domesticity out of the boundaries of a home. Or a green field, or in this case a lake, becomes a whole city when ephemeral events define the temporality framework of pop-up weekend societies. Transcapes, or what I have called transcapes, are those juxtaposed contexts which are constructed within the domain of metropolitanism, and they are developed in the bordering realms of urbanity and domesticity. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Pedro. And our fourth presentation for this final panel of the day is PLSTCT? Is that how you say it? Plasticity, sorry.
Act 1, comfort. The chief function of the body is to carry the brain around. This quote by Thomas Edison represents the quintessence of the modernist culture that shaped the main features of Western architecture. That is, the subsidiarity of the body in relation to space. Although he was a brilliant observer, Thomas Edison couldn't see the infinite potential of the body. The body is a precious and enormous source of unpredictable knowledge that is alternative to the dominant standards. What could be more bodily than everyday life? How are the daily rhythms of the body affected by top-down and predetermined factors? Daily life is the most complete expression of capitalist modernity. The everyday experience is an experience colonized by commodity, shadowed by inauthenticity, yet remaining the only source of resistance and change. Working, eating, grooming, excreting, breathing, walking, resting, sleeping, having sex, getting sick, and getting well are forms of body praxis and expressions of dynamic social, cultural, and political relations. They embody all the acquired habits that represent the cultural arts of using and being in the body and in the world. As inhabitants of the so-called civilized world, our bodily relation to space has been flanked by surfaces, horizontal, smooth, bright, and comfortable surfaces. The history of comfort is a history of colonization. Comfort is not just a set of dimensional standards. Rather, it includes dominant aesthetics, lifestyles, status symbols, and regulations. Questioning the Western and contemporary notion of comfort means opposing chrononormativity and spatial hierarchies generated by the subtle but effective capital accumulation systems. Comfort is a technology shaped by humans for humans in order to normalize our daily actions by subliminally regulating our productive biorhythms. Act 2, sleeping. Contemporary 24/7 culture pushes people into constant activity and emerging strategies for surveillance and control. For years, sleeping was understood as the only exception in the uninterrupted theft of time from us by capitalism. Nevertheless, the fluid attitude of capitalism eventually penetrated into sleeping, turning it into a resource tied to production, consumption, warfare, and biopolitics. We are enticed both to sleep less and sleep productively. Contemporary culture practice mimics this trend with sleep performances, sleep hotels, sleep music, and the unstoppable spread of the so-called nap pods. Even the bed, once considered a private space for bodily rituals, is slowly turning into an additional workspace. Even at night, we unwittingly work by scrolling our social media feeds, enveloped in the softness of our memory foam mattress, until we fall asleep exhausted. Despite being a vital function, sleeping is not an immutable condition. It evolved and will evolve through time and space. Animals and plants sleep in many different ways. Some of them, apparently, don't, like ants. A queen fire ant sleeps on average 9 hours every day. In contrast, worker ants sleep just half as much, and have a rest by taking hundreds of short naps. That ensures that enough worker ants are awake at any one time to protect and serve the colony. Ants are a hyperorganism, just like humans, just like capitalism. How is the human working class evolving? Are we turning into a class of human ants able to be productive 24/7? Do we still need sleeping? Act 3, monkey bed. Nobody asks for a wrapped, hanged monkey bed for post-human individuals, and that makes it unnecessary. But things can be unnecessary only at first glance. After that, they generate desires. Unnecessary objects shape culture and society. Before creating things out of nothing, humans experienced an arboreal life that lasted way longer than our horizontal one. That's why, despite the extreme horizontality of architecture, we are able to climb, and we enjoy doing it. Ergonomics had an opposite meaning. For an eternity, the shape of humans adapted to the surroundings. Europeans met apes during colonization. These creatures embodied the ethical uncertainty of colonization by inhabiting the blurry and murky border between nature and culture. The first European description of an orangutan in 1641 was a drawing of a female orangutan in a modest human pose, covering her sexual organs with the palms of her hands. Orangutans build nests on top of trees. Scientists consider these structures to be not only the result of instinctive behavior, but as transferable cultural artifacts. They build nests every evening and abandon them in the morning, shifting daily from architecture to archaeology. The primate body, including the contemporary humans one, is a discursive construct and therefore a literal reality, not the other way around. The misleading notion of Anthropocene makes humans believe they are the dominant agency on the planet. It's more likely that the capital technological network is on the top of the food chain. Capitalocene sounds better. Do contemporary humans have contemporary predators? And what do they look like? What matter are they made of? Do we still need to escape someone or something? A monkey bed is an escape from comfort. It is counter-ergonomic. It doesn't isolate the sleeper, it exposes it. It's not so efficient in recharging you. It causes a waste of energy instead. It is not functional for adult working life, just like playing. Play unites the species. Work divides the classes. We have decided not to die.
So, thank you all for joining us and for preparing. I know this was a really interesting and maybe challenging prompt to pack a project in a suitcase, but I really appreciate the vast spectrum of approaches to that challenge. And I'm really noticing how a lot of you have really integrated narrative into your work rather than just straightforward presentations of representation. And let's say for Robert and for plasticity, you intriguingly left this rather open-ended for us. So I was wondering if both of you could just unpack a little bit what your choices were behind the presentations and how this is an extension or an alternative representation of conversations and work that you do within an actual studio space and with each other and with your collaborators.
Okay, well, the reason for this particular kind of presentation is mainly two, maybe. One of them is that we have a background in the art world, and we are more used to relate with this kind of approach. And also the other one is that in general, in our practice, we try to contaminate our work, and we thought that this kind of a situation was ideal for something different. So even the voice wasn't our voice; it was here. Dana maybe is over there because we don't like our own voice, and so that's the way we like to work, like trying to having something more, a plus from another field which is not our own. In this case, the performative art.
And that's super interesting too, since your performance was about the body via a disembodied material. And I think the body and the difference between the individual and the mass is something that really pierces through all of the projects. But first I want to give Robert an opportunity to talk a little bit about his project.
Yeah, I think there is some conversation between ours and Plasticity's project in terms of sort of a pre-architectural, pre-civilizational condition of swinging on this branch here. The tree in this case being a cylinder and like more of a pole shape. In my case, being flattened as a representational technique, which is, people make these sort of cross-shaped trees in their model as a stand-in or as a representation of a real tree. And here it's being taken literally as a kind of a Miesian column. That's my baby over there. But the term representation, I mean, it means like a model or a drawing, but it also is a cultural word, a cultural construct in terms of people being represented or objects being represented. And if we think about trees as a sort of non-human entity that demands representation or demands its own status as living as an entity outside of the Anthropocene, then we can think about it that way.
I'm just curious, I mean, to maybe kind of go back to the format of this entire project, and maybe especially since like performance emerged in two projects, and this is just like how you approach the space of the exhibition and think about the space of the exhibition as an opportunity, like thinking about the audiences that you're speaking to in the context of being here at the Triennale, and how that fits in, how you see that fitting into your individual practices.
Should we go back down the line?
Well, for us, it's true that performance is not something that is intrinsically related to our work, but in this case, it was really interesting, like, first to put together a piece of work that in our case was like, it was based on the same topic, but it was super different between them. So our performance was based on trying to put them together in a frame that would contain all of this knowledge.
Well, I want to add that we use the chapters to like organize it as well. Pedro do the same, no? That's the same, because we are like trying to tell a story about it. I think there are different stories, different research, different things that we like to connect in a whole thing. That's why we like to do some kind of chapters, and I think it's the same that happens to you.
Well, in my case, I mean, I totally agree with you because and there are also some common references in both offices' works. But for me, it's true that it is really important to the sort of the structure of the or to have a structure the project in order to present it and how cutting it to kind of several pieces also enables it to have some certain strength in terms of narrative in order to combine and to juxtapose pieces that elsewhere would be not related so much. And coming back to the topic of narratives as well, I think that well, in 4 of the cases, I think that it is quite important or quite relevant, the acknowledgement of the construction of a narrative and the construction of context or fictions in order to create or to propose projects of architecture or cultural production in any case, and how the 4 projects somehow they all try to refer, either if they are kind of research-based or they are speculative-based, they try to kind of claim for that acknowledgement of the narrative as a crucial part to propose something. In my case, or in my particular case, I think that it is extremely important in my practice, not just in the part of sort of research projects, but also in the office of more kind of doing competition and all sort of boring stuff, to post-produce existing cultural products and to take them and to overlay new narratives on top of materials that is existing. In this case, taking historical precedents and actually not understanding or not using the history that has been told, but rewriting that history in order to generate 4 typologies or 4 projects. And in other cases, when going more to the kind of more pragmatic professional practice, taking some references and then shifting them or giving them a new content so that the end product sort of changes.
So in terms of being in this space, well, I worked at Moss and First Office before this, Michael Meredith and Hilary Sample, and I definitely fall into that lineage of contingencies in methods of representation, translating drawings into buildings, but I also have a day job. I work in Revit and AutoCAD. I'm recently licensed, so doing this lazy scrolling through AutoCAD is sort of a therapy for me because that's what I do all day, and so I'm just trying to kind of be comfortable with the fact that that's what architects do is sit at a computer all day and make drawings.
So I wanted to go back to the question of the body and as it relates to identity, since it was pretty much addressed by all of you in different ways. And I could discern, let's say, each of you just grappling with the question of identity. So on the one hand, what does it mean to be human or non-human and to interact with the world in these different ways? For you, the construction of diverse identities or finding those diverse identities that might have otherwise been hidden within different types of interiors. And for you, the idea of the mass, where there in a way is no individuality, but that there is a collectivity that sort of forms a different type of individuality. And I'm just wondering if you could all talk about that, because we're in different times where the question of identity and diversity is constantly on our minds, but I know that we all struggle for ways to really be totally inclusive. So I'm wondering if you could just talk about some of your research experiences and ways that you try to cut through these issues through your architectural work?
Well, the first thing is that I believe that architecture is something that is, it has like a really strong power, and it can really change the environment in which architects do something in order to, I don't know, create like a pre-designed thing. And for us in this research, the main idea was that maybe as users, we can create by, I don't know, like performances, ways of changing this very constricted, the very constriction of the architecture by doing something, by doing some performance that are linked to our social conditions, to our backgrounds. In that sense, when we study these processes of doing architecture, it's more related with social backgrounds, and how maybe we need to take a step back and start to learn from these communities that can give us like these keys in order to be, yeah.
It's not too easy to answer this question. We, in our practice, we try to relate to diversity, meaning to shed the light on the fact that the urban life is always a matter of class. So with this kind of research, we are doing something which is more abstract. We use the body as a metaphor to speak about how architecture has a power on to shape identity of people, and how people are, and how it can be also the other way around, when an architect and designer, they decide to create some hesitation in this automatic design process, which is more related to the market than something that I cannot name, because I don't want to say humans or nature or animals or plants or living beings, because everything is someone. So maybe Jack said something about the object-oriented ontology, which is a constant reference for architects today. And I think I agree that it cannot be a reference in terms of turning it into aesthetic, but it's important to understand how everything is connected in a way which is not reversible anymore. So I was saying, this kind of research on that we have called a creator of habit, a critical ontology of comfort. We decided to use comfort, the study, a complex and multidisciplinary research on comfort, to understand what are the potentialities of architecture in terms of recognize diversity. But we are also more like site-related, or we are more projects which are more into reality, and in that case it's very different to relate to identity, because the local identity of a suburb or a city area there are like two ways of relate to this topic. And in this moment, we are trying to approach both, and we have the one related to to reality, let's say reality, is we do it through a curatorial approach, because it's difficult to decide to shape by your project the space where the people should live. So we decided to create temporary platform for sharing knowledge, and we'll see what happened. So in this kind of project, we are more free to create something, because it has no consequences in real life, and because everything shapes people's living beings' identity.
Sorry, I just forgot the question. What's that? Oh yeah, identity. Okay, yeah, I had an answer prepared. I would say that our office, which is actually just me, Trees, has this. We were talking about it earlier. There's like multiple or versus singular name, but it's really me doing all the work. My wife does her own performance art practice, and we kind of cross paths. But the idea of multiple subjectivities is pretty interesting. We're all different on different platforms. And I would say that the essay that we constantly return to is the Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway, which is like 35 years old at this point. But that's a very short, relatively short essay. I mean, 10 pages or 10 or 12 pages long, that neatly ties together issues of race and gender into a technological construct. And I read that like over and over again. And I think that's all I got to say about that. I mean, yeah, we're all making friends here now, but then after that, we will only know each other through images that we share, and we're all kind of cyborgs online.
Open it up to Does anyone have any questions they'd like to pose to the panelists?
I had a question about, there seemed to be this sort of thread of domesticity and of kind of the everyday of households, maybe of what people would have used to call like private life, which seems to connect the different projects in certain ways. And thinking sort of historically, it's not sort of self-evident that that's what architecture is about, or it's the main thing that architectural practice is about. And I just sort of wondered I kind of wanted to invite you to say whether there's something either in your understanding of the contemporary or your kind of understanding of your own practice and agenda that makes you want to center it in that way.
In my case, I think that the aim of this project, and also of quite a few other projects from my office, is the claim of the acknowledgement that there is not anymore such a thing as urbanity, as domesticity, as extremely clear realms, but actually the condition that they have been blurred and they have been mixed. This is something that obviously has happened since all the time, but there has been a tendency in the contemporary world for these things to happen more explicitly and more rapidly. In terms of what you were saying, that not all of the architecture is or deals with domesticity or with the domestic realm. I think that in my case, it is just a word to simplify what the implications of it has, but it also deals with, obviously, with privacy, and publicly, and also with intimacy and how the self is shared, and how the public sphere, or what we call the public, is constructed and is a cultural production. In that case, it is also exemplified in terms of how the natural or the artificial are not such a thing, but they are actually also nature is a cultural construction, and in that sense, I think that domesticity or urbanity or many other terms are just cultural constructions that have different implications historically. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say, going off of what he said, there is this, if we approach a contemporary condition, and I think we're looking at with the internet, looking at deep history, there's a renewed interest in the origins of things and the origins of where we come from, which is why I really loved the swinging presentation. In terms of domesticity, houseplants seem to be very on trend right now. Lots of plants everywhere, and just coming to terms with like what the next step is in the human nature divide, and thinking about what kind of possible integration of that historically divided construct. Because like in America, the indigenous peoples, which Europeans called Indians because they thought it was India. That people have this concept that they lived in the wild, but in fact, they highly curated the natural environment, the forests, and the grasslands. They curated the animals and the species so that it remains in peak production, rather than just decimating everything, clear cutting, building cities, and that whole Western civilization thing that we tend to do. So I don't have anything else to say.
In our case, for example, the first chapter that we presented is like the first progress in research about the queer appropriation of space. And it's true that the queer appropriation of space didn't stop at the bedsit door in this case, but when you want to analyze some kind of identities, like for example the case of lesbians, then these spaces like interiors or domestic spaces suddenly become crucial in order to understand it. Then it's not just doing a research on domesticity because we want to do it about domesticity, because we could talk about many things, but it's also an approach to those kind of identities that are not or do not have that strong presence in the streets. This is enough.
Any other questions from the audience?
I just might make a quick observation. It's really interesting, I think, like throughout the day today, like where these projects operate. That are they, in the spectrum of the field? Are they operating in the core of the discipline? Are they operating in the profession? Are they now operating in the public realm? And what happens? And what happens in this kind of? I'm thinking of migrant. That the desire to have readers and audience outside of architecture, and what that does then to architecture. And just thinking about these projects, being in such a public space, it's also really interesting to me that the original state of the art of architecture was very combative, and there's definitely been something emerging in the sessions I have been here today. There's a lot of agreement. In fact, I think Jack Self even said what aligns us or what unifies us. And I wonder if it's okay to actually not be unified and to let some of these different positions kind of start to emerge, and if we'll see that sort of unfold throughout the next 2 days.
So with that, we'll call it a wrap for day one and see you tomorrow at whatever time Joseph told you to be here, because he didn't tell me. At 11. Okay. Thank you, everyone.